like to bring forward.
And
so next is David, and then Nooni says you.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Kat, thanks for adding me to the space. The point that I wanted to bring to everyone's attention is, in much of the West, it is said that we are governed by consent. Yet there are so very few people that are able to articulate what the mechanism is for withdrawing that consent in practical terms. So I know that, I spoke to Neil about this once before, and it's something that has been sort of brought up, or alluded to certainly in many ways. But for me, one of the most important priorities is the fact that there's no practical mechanism of consent. So having a right that you can't use is the same as not having that right to begin with. So for me, the focus of a lot of these truth movements per se, one of the coordinated opportunities that I see for high leverage activities is to coordinate on a point that everyone can agree on, regardless of where they sit on the political spectrum. So, whether they're left or right, ULEZ is a smaller example of that. But I'm talking at a higher level. People of the Western democracies can all agree that if we are governed by consent, it only stands to reason that there should be a mechanism for withdrawing that consent. Because while you may not care about this one specific topic, that the next topic may be something that's close and you hold dear to your heart. So for me, one of the primary focus needs to be on how do we implement a mechanism of consent that can be withdrawn with the blockchain technology that's available. That's actually technically possible for the first time in history. But certainly from a political standpoint and a legal standpoint, obviously, mountains need to be moved for that to happen. But it then enables this sort of conversation around the Swiss-style direct democracy, whereby the public can call for a referendum and, actually, rather than just having lip service consent of the governed, they can actually action their consent and withdraw their consent on specific matters. So I'm curious to know if anyone on today's space has done any research into the legalities around this. I certainly have, and perhaps another time we could share some more details on that. But I'm certainly curious to know what other people's thoughts are on the consent of the governed, the fact that it's widely accepted in history. All of the legal scholars in history acknowledge that this definitely stands. And obviously, it isn't just the ability to vote, because that's suffrage, not democracy. So that's one of the things that I'd like to focus on.
Would anyone listening like to pick that up?
Mitch, what do you think? We'll put Mitch on the spot.
Hey there.
Hey.
Which specific part do you want me to address first?
The practical application for removing consent. It's said that in Western liberal democracies, we are all governed by consent, and the government is formed with the consent of the consent of the governed, right? So how is it withdrawn?
I think there's a lot of problems here. I think that all the governments are bankrupt, and I pointed out in my book that the reason why the book is called Planet Ponzi is because they've issued so much debt that it's mathematically impossible for it to be repaid. So the way that they're withdrawing consent is basically this has been a Marxist style coup that's taken over. It's an actual takeover, I think. I mean, if you look at Biden's election, he wasn't really elected. This isn't conspiracy theory. I don't have a tinfoil hat, but even the insiders in Washington admit that there were too many anomalies in that election for it to be what had happened. So I think, desperate times call for desperate measures. This is a counter-revolution. We're dealing with Marxists here that are actually trying to undermine society by changing history, ending history, abolishing it, starting it today, getting rid of religion, destroying family values. So, we have to look at economics and not accept the chaos. We can't accept this. We have to take a stance and position against it, no matter what it takes, as long as it's peaceful. If we have to say, you want to make believe you represent us, we're going to make believe to work, and we'll shut down everything. Nothing will happen until we get what we want. And, that will happen. It's going to happen in Germany first, I think, France second, UK third, or maybe the USA when they put Trump in jail. And, I don't particularly think
Mitch,
Trump's the best guy in the world.
Mitch, Sean here. In answer, David, short answer to your question, this is why we've been, as raised by Alistair Heath in the Daily Telegraph,
Right.
and several others over the last, say, 2 months, is that if the UK, as an objective, let's say, if one of the parties comes out and says, let's just say it's Reclaim, Laurence and Andrew, one of our cornerstone policies for the next general election will be that we will introduce a direct democracy. There will be quarterly referenda for one or more topics. Obviously, we need to optimize the efficiency and cost of doing the referenda, but that will work itself out over time. Technology plus, or people want, physical voting, nothing digital, etc. Different discussion. The point is, what that does is exactly your objective of
Right. But
having a function to withdraw consent or to give consent during
absolutely.
intra-general election periods.
Agreed. 100%.
Another thing you see today, if you read all the comments that we've had around all of this stuff that's been going on over the last week as we've built up to this space, is, and as we've seen over the last 3 years in particular, is that many of the people, the voters, are saying, well, what's the point of voting? Because my vote doesn't count. These people
Right.
just do what they want at the end of the day anyway.
That's
So
right.
from a UK perspective, obviously different to the US because different systems, if they're much like Switzerland, and as Dr. Binder said on a tweet last night, the Swiss system's not perfect because once you have a uni-party in terms of all the parties coming together and colluding with mainstream media, that presents a different challenge, okay?
You can manipulate
Right.
groupthink.
But
Yeah.
here's the problem. We don't have, and I said this first off when I was speaking, is we have no accountability mechanism. And as long as we don't have an accountability mechanism and we let the corruption run rampant,
that's what we're saying.
So I understand what you're trying to do with direct democracy. Right, I understand.
Direct democracy, that gives you an accountability mechanism because you just block them. End of. You get enough signatures, pro rata Switzerland, have a vote like Brexit, and you say, sorry, we will not accept that. End of discussion.
Right,
Yeah,
I understand, but it has to be done in conjunction with a mechanism to impeach the people who have impugned and taken away what they've promised to do, because there has to be accountability for the people that have caused this mess. And the problem that we're in right now, and we face with the central banks, is we've enabled this mess to continue for the past 12 years, and now we're in a position that we're going to have a massive meltdown. And this is what the power grab takes place, because that's all happening in the background. So I understand that this is the need for the restructure, and I think Neil mentioned earlier, we need from a ground up. We need a ground up quite rewrite of the way we've been doing things, because they've been fundamentally wrong, and there's no way out of the problems that we're in. And this is what we need to own up to, is that the economic problems that they keep lying, deny, extend and pretend and make up that everything's fine, but it's not fine, and we're going to have a disaster, and it's unavoidable now. So when that happens, we need the right people in the right seats to take the place of these incompetents that caused this mess.
Yeah,
and these people need to be held to account. I understand direct democracy is part of it, but we've got to get a party to agree to it.
Could it be argued then that direct democracy is the tool that enables us to implement the mechanism to remove, one of the risks of direct democracy when you've got a entire MSM that's been taken hostage by the opposition, is that with direct democracy, they can manipulate public opinion to be able to vote for something that's not necessarily in their interest. We've seen that with COVID and the narratives that were pushed and controlled.
Google does that. I've written articles about that.
Sure.
You can prove that Google manipulates elections, and it's very easy for them. So we've got to come up with a bulletproof system. And this is really imperative that we do this, and we do it quickly, because if we don't, we're sliding down a slippery slope right into tyranny and authoritarianism.
Just to say on that. Just to say, as June has been saying earlier, as Neil's been saying, in terms of talking to the ordinary people, us on the street, okay, that the feedback message is very different to the Twitter sphere and to the mainstream media, okay, very, very different. Even during the Brexit campaign and what James Freeman was alluding to earlier, there was a coalition of the hard-working class from all sides of the political spectrum, okay, that came together in the Brexit party as was, okay, or that view. So if there were these quarterly referenda, that would give, and we remember we're September 2023, the election's probably next year 2024. So as discussed with Ben Habib, who sadly could not join us tonight, we've said, now in our lifetimes, there is a moment in time where voters, the people, are prepared to take a chance to try something new because nothing else is working or has worked. So in my view, if a party, for example, Reclaim, comes out and says a cornerstone of our manifesto at the 2024 election, the next general election, will include a form of direct democracy for referenda quarterly, I think that loads of people will go for that.
Yeah,
I agree. And
I
I'll
agree.
pass the mic over. There's just one more point I'd like to make before I hand back over to someone else to speak. And that is, on a much, much smaller scale, I believe that there is an underutilized tool that we as the public, we have available to us that we simply don't leverage enough. And that is the concept of jury nullification. Because when you look at the role of the jury in a court of law, the jury actually has two roles. One is to judge the presence of innocence or guilt, i.e., did the person commit this crime or not? But the second and lesser known job of the jury is to decide whether the law is fair and just to begin with, because you can be guilty of committing a supposed crime, but still do the right thing. So in the US, they have something, they have an association where they educate jury and what some of their rights are on being able to nullify unjust laws. And I don't think that's spoken about here. So I think that is another opportunity, because if enough court cases end up with being nullified, one, it can have laws removed from the statute books that are unjust, but two, even on an individual case-by-case basis, it enables the people and the citizens of that country to exert an element of control. And if they don't get convictions over certain laws and prosecutions, and if that happens and a trend emerges, I think it gives us an element of control. And again, most people don't know that they have that right when they're called to jury duty. So I think that's another opportunity for the truth movement to explore and expand and get experts to talk about, because once people know, again, if having a right that you don't know you've got is the same as not having it. Therefore, if we're able to educate people around that responsibility and that right, and I think these people, that small businesses that are getting fined for opening during lockdowns, ULEZ fines, the more and more of this stuff that they keep forcing upon us as they erode our values and try and have children become wards of the state, and all of these things that keep happening against our will, more and more of this is going to end up in court. So I think it's now more important than ever that the general public are aware that they actually have the ability to nullify laws through jury nullification. So,
Good
But
point, Dave.
but it's worse than that.
We need to move on. We need to move on now, guys.
sure,
Sorry to cut it.
understood.
Cats are giving me a kicking. So
Okay,
we're gonna move. Dave, very good points. Thank you very much. We're gonna move it on quickly now, like Dr. Ahmed Malik does on his spaces. Nuni,
much appreciated.
Pleasure, Dave. Thank you. Nuni Sassu, please. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope my sound is okay. I am Nuni Sassu, the purveyor of the Red Pill Starter Pack. The Red Pill Starter Pack is perfect for when you're having difficult conversations with people talking about these matters. It's an index of links, all things countermeasure 19. It is a countermeasure basically funded by the U.S. Department of Defense. But you'll find information about COVID vax injury, shedding injury, literate medical professionals who know how to treat and detox, as well as the protocols, data, groups, articles, videos, and more. And who was it? I do believe it was June Scott who said that it's these conversations that we must do. In about February, I believe we were at 30, 40, 30. 30% we are people who are gone, will never drink. They drank the Kool-Aid, they're gone. 30% are awake, and that was February. The 40% is the battleground of hearts and minds. I believe 40% of that, and we have to keep pounding away. The mainstream news is not on our side. Neither is Google. Neither are all of these platforms. And we must have these conversations face to face. And some might think that's too much information for them, but I say this. One of the most important things is getting people getting their injury diagnosed and treated well. And I'm so happy to see Dr. Cartland in here. I have him featured as a medical professional that is literate to these matters in the UK. There's also, I've got for, let's see, Canada and the USA, where you can call and get proper diagnoses. They're not going to find what they're not looking for. and most of them are following the directives set by the WHO or de facto Fauci, which is what our health minister did. And still we have no access to ivermectin. Nevertheless, the Red Pill Starter Pack, you can download it to your phone. You can save the link to your phone. You can generate a QR code. You can send the link by email, and it gives them all of the information that everybody should know, but was withheld because of severe censorship campaigns. And as for the other matters discussed, I'm an Indigenous Canadian, and trust me, too bad Laurence Fox isn't here. I know exactly how how he feels walking through the streets of London. But, you know, don't fear. I mean, we managed to survive, you know, colonization and maintain our culture and language. And you will too, as well as sharing whatever you have with the newcomers, as we did as well. But in terms of it, you must have these difficult conversations. Find the courage to do so. Stand up. This is the time to stand up. We are in the battle for hearts and minds of the rest of the populace that we need to form critical mass. There are more of us than them. It is the captured mainstream news and captured social media sites that say differently. They're all Pravda. In the 80s, the Russians knew Pravda was lying.
Miss Nooney, do you have a question for speakers? Because I'm sorry to interrupt, but we really have to go. We still have 27 people who are asking to speak.
Yeah.
I love you so much. But,
Thank you. Herman, your comment, please.
Okay.
Herman, unmute your mic. Dr. Edling.
Thank you. Sean, you invited me to speak about our South African court case. Should I do that now or later?
Yeah, just go for that now because I know it's getting late for you. Just to update everyone quickly, and then we'll go to Dr. Ahmed Malik.
Okay, thank you. So an NGO in South Africa, the Freedom Alliance of South Africa, has filed a high court case against the South African government and our Medicines Regulatory Authority, which is called SAPRA, and Pfizer. And the case is to ask the court to nullify the registration and authorization of the Pfizer vaccines